The wind carried dust across the quiet yard as Maribel Hayes stepped out with a basket of laundry. The sun hung low, soft and harmless, until she saw the shape standing at the gate. A lone horse, silver-coated, breathing hard. Her heart stopped. It was Ghost, the family stallion who had vanished 15 years ago with her husband and daughter. But the horse at her fence wasn't the proud black animal she remembered. He stood older now, gray around the muzzle, ribs faint beneath his coat, a new limp in his left leg. Scars crossed his flanks like a map of battles no one had ever spoken of. And tied to his saddle was a weathered leather satchel. Maribel dropped the laundry. The basket toppled, socks scattering across the dirt, forgotten. Her feet moved before her mind caught up. She reached Ghost's side slowly, like approaching something half holy, half terrifying. "Ghost boy, is it really you?" The horse lowered his head and pressed it to her shoulder. His breath shook. His eyes, dark, knowing, held something she hadn't felt in 15 years. Warning, fear, and something strange like sorrow. Maribel untied the satchel with trembling fingers. Inside, she found things that did not belong to the life she once had. A tarnished brass compass, a woman's gold ring, carved with symbols she didn't recognize, and a folded piece of paper written in her daughter's handwriting. But the ink, it looked fresh. Maribel unfolded the paper, expecting it to crumble. Instead, she read 5 words that stole her breath away. "Mama, we're still here. Hide." The barn swayed in her vision. Her knees buckled. Ghost nudged her chest gently, urging her back to focus. When she looked into the stallion's eyes, she saw something that chilled her blood. He wasn't just exhausted. He wasn't just wounded. He was terrified. Ghost's ears pinned back toward the house. And then she heard it. Footsteps. Inside her home. Slow. Searching. Deliberate. Someone was in her house. Maribel froze. She lived alone. She had locked the doors. And Ghost had planted himself between her and the porch, blocking her path with his whole weight. She tried to step around him. He shoved her back. "Ghost, what's wrong? Let me in." But the horse only stared at the house with a predator's tension, nostrils flaring, muscles quivering. Then she heard the soft whisper of a floorboard, one she knew by heart, right inside her kitchen. Someone was waiting for her. Ghost nudged her again, not toward the house, but toward the barn. This time she listened. They slipped across the yard, keeping low. Maribel's breath trembled in her chest. Inside the barn shadow, she unfolded the note again. Her daughter, Lenny's handwriting. The same looping letters Lenny had practiced at the kitchen table when she was 16. But Lenny would be 31 now. Why did the ink look new? Ghost paced to the back window, ears forward. Maribel followed his gaze through the dusty glass and saw a man at her kitchen window. A stranger. His clothes were too fine for cowboy work, too clean for someone who belonged in this stretch of Wyoming prairie. And he was staring straight at the barn. He lifted a hand, pointed at her, then smiled. Maribel pressed a hand to her mouth to stop a cry. Ghost stomped, snorting hard, a warning. The stranger began walking across the yard toward them. No more hiding, no more caution. He knew exactly where she was. Ghost moved to the rear barn door, pushing it with his nose. An escape route. A message. Run. But where could she go? Maribel had waited 15 years for a sign from her family. Now she had one. Ghost had brought it on his back. And the stranger crossing her yard meant someone else had been waiting too. The brass compass in her pocket warmed suddenly, heating against her palm. Maribel pulled it out. The needle spun wildly, shaking, stuttering, searching, then stopped, pointing toward the distant mountains, toward the place where her husband Levi and daughter Lenny vanished, toward the place Ghost had fled from. Ghost shoved her again, harder this time. The stranger was only yards away now. Maribel grabbed the reins. "All right, boy, let's go." Ghost lowered himself just enough for her to climb onto his back, something he had never done in all his years unless danger pressed close. The stranger shouted behind them, voice sharp and furious, but Ghost launched from the barn in a furious burst of speed. His old bones protested, but his heart, still fiercely loyal, carried them toward the open plains. The wind tore at Maribel's hair as the ranch fell behind them. The stranger's voice became a distant echo lost in the prairie. But she could not escape the truth, rising like a storm inside her. Someone had been watching her house. Someone had been waiting for Ghost's return. Someone knew her family wasn't dead. The compass needle stayed locked on the mountains. Ghost ran with purpose, following trails no human had ever seen. And Maribel clung to him, praying to reach whatever waited out there, before whatever waited out there found her first. The canyon air grew cold as dusk settled, turning the rocks violet and the scattered brush into dark shapes crouched against the earth. Mara Hale held Reed's journal tight against her chest, each page still trembling with the beat of her heart. She could hear the men outside talking, their bootsteps scraping across gravel as they spread out to secure the area. Beside her, the old horse Blade shifted nervously, snorting at the scent of danger. His once midnight coat had faded to storm cloud gray over the years, but his strength, his loyalty, had never wavered. Mara touched his nose. "Easy, boy. We're not done yet." A heavy silence settled just beyond the cave mouth. She knew they were waiting for her fear to break, waiting for her to step into the open where they could take her without a fight. Blade turned his head sharply. Outside, a man coughed, impatient and close. Mara slipped deeper into the shadows, fingers brushing the final page of Reed's journal, the map that marked everything Marcus Varon had destroyed her life to obtain. A map leading not to a silver mine, but to a truth Varon could never accept. If he learned that truth, her family would never be safe again. Bootsteps crunched outside. "Mara Hale," Varon called, voice smooth as polished wood, calm as a man who believed time itself obeyed him. "Come out now, and I promise you won't be harmed." Blade stamped once, a warning. Varon chuckled softly. "Your husband and daughter said the same thing once. Look where that got them." Mara steadied her breathing. "Where are they?" she called. "Alive," Varon said, tone indifferent. "For now. Your cooperation ensures their comfort. Your defiance." He let the word trail away like smoke. The cave walls pressed in. For 15 years she'd imagined hearing Reed's voice again, seeing Rowan smile, feeling her daughter's arms around her. Now the moment stood on the far side of 3 armed men. Blade nudged her hand again, insistent, urgent. Mara leaned to peek toward the cave mouth. One of Varon's men had grown impatient, creeping forward alone, rifle in hand. Bad idea. She had lived on this land her whole life. She knew the canyon like she knew her own pulse. He stepped across a stretch of loose shale. It gave way beneath him with a sudden clatter, loud enough to echo through the canyon. Every head snapped up. Blade bolted sideways, ramming his shoulder into a supporting rock and sending a shower of dust and pebbles down the narrow passage. The man outside stumbled and swore, falling to one knee. "Mara," Varon barked. "Come out now. This is your final warning." A final warning. 15 years ago, he'd said the same thing to Reed. Mara tucked the journal into her dress, pulled a sharp rock from the cave floor, the closest thing to a weapon she had, and stepped toward the mouth of the cave. She didn't get 3 paces before Blade moved again, planting himself between her and the light. The old horse lowered his head, teeth bared, ears pinned. Protective, determined, unmoving. "No," Mara whispered. "I'm not letting you get hurt again." But Blade refused to move. Outside, Varon sighed, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. Enough of this. She heard the metallic snick of a rifle being cocked. Then a gunshot split the air. But it wasn't Varon who fired. The shot came from above. A bullet struck the ground inches from Varon's boots, spraying his fine coat with dust. Another followed, clipping the hat off the man at his right. Blade lifted his head. Mara's breath caught. A voice rolled down the canyon like thunder breaking open the sky. "Let my wife go, Reed." Mara pressed a hand to her mouth. He was alive, and he wasn't alone. Another shot rang out, this one hitting the rocks beside Varon's left hand. The banker's men scattered like startled quail, ducking for cover behind boulders. Blade whinnied a fierce, triumphant sound. "Mama!" A woman's voice called from the rim of the canyon. "Get behind, Blade." Rowan, her baby girl, now a grown woman. Tears blurred Mara's vision, but she moved without thinking, pressing herself against Blade as he shielded her with his aging but formidable body. Varen cursed loudly. "Enough," he shouted. "Ale, show yourself, or I'll—" He never finished. Another shot rang out, sharper, cleaner. Varen jerked as a bullet grazed his arm, tearing his sleeve and drawing blood. He gasped, stumbling back. "You're surrounded, Varen," Reed shouted from above. "You know my aim. Don't make me finish what you started 15 years ago." Varen looked upward, eyes narrowing. "I should have killed you when I had the chance. And I should have suspected you earlier," Reed replied. "I should have known no honest man wants another man's land that badly." Varen's good hand tightened on his rifle. "This land holds more than dirt, Hale. And your greed holds more than sense," Reed answered. A tense silence fell. Mara felt Blade trembling slightly, not in fear, but in readiness. Then she heard Rowan's voice again. "Mama, stay low. We're coming down." Varen turned sharply. "No, you're not." He lunged for a better angle, raising his rifle toward the canyon rim. Mara moved before she could think. She grabbed a handful of gravel and hurled it into Varen's face. The banker recoiled, blinded for an instant. Blade reared back, hoofs slicing the air. Varen dove aside just in time, rolling across the dirt as the horse struck the ground where he'd been standing. Gunshots crackled from above as Reed and Rowan descended the canyon wall with disciplined precision born of 15 years surviving danger. Varen's men scattered. One ran outright. Another dropped his weapon and raised his hands. Only one stayed to fight, exchanging fire with Reed, badly outmatched. Varen himself scrambled behind a boulder, bleeding and furious. "Mara," Reed's voice boomed. "Stay with Blade." But she stepped forward, heart hammering, eyes fixed on the shadow behind the boulder. She wanted to see the man who stole 15 years from her. Wanted to face him with her own eyes. Varen peeked over the rock and froze. Mara Hale stood before him, dirt-streaked, trembling, defiant, and very much alive. His face twisted with disbelief. You weren't supposed to fight back." Mara lifted her chin. "You took 15 years from me, Marcus. You don't get another second." A rifle clicked behind her. Rowan, a grown woman now, steady-handed, eyes burning with the fire of every stolen night, every hungry winter, every moment of hiding. "Drop your weapon," Rowan said. Varen hesitated. A single breath, a single heartbeat. Then he dropped the rifle. The canyon fell silent except for Blade's heavy breathing. Mara finally let herself breathe. Her family, all three, were within reach. But as Reed stepped into view, lowering his rifle, his face softened with a mixture of joy and sorrow. "Mara," he whispered. She reached for him, but he didn't step closer. Instead, his eyes flicked to the canyon rim, then back to her. "There's something you need to know before you come any closer." Her heart stilled. Something in his voice carried the weight of another truth. A truth she wasn't ready for. Not yet, but it was coming, and it would change everything. Reed Hale didn't move right away. He stood on a lower ledge of the canyon wall, rifle still in hand, eyes fixed on Mara like he was afraid she might disappear if he blinked. Rowan stepped beside him, lowering her weapon, her breath coming fast from the climb. For one stretched, fragile moment, no one spoke. 15 years of pain and longing hung between them like dust suspended in evening light. Then Mara whispered, "Reed," he swallowed hard. "You shouldn't have come here alone." Mara almost laughed, the sound brittle, edged with grief and relief tangled together. "I didn't know where else to go." Blade snorted and nudged her shoulder, urging her forward. But Reed still didn't move. His eyes flicked toward the cave behind her, toward Varen's bleeding men, toward the place where danger had lived under his skin for 15 years. Rowan touched her father's arm. "Daddy, it's Mama." Reed exhaled once, slow, shaking, and then he climbed the rest of the way down. Mara met him halfway. They didn't embrace at first. They simply stood close enough to feel the warmth of each other's breath. Mara lifted a hand, touched the gray that now streaked Reed's beard, the lines carved from years of worry and survival. He closed his eyes at her touch. Then he pulled her into his arms. 15 years of silence collapsed between them, replaced by the sound of her quiet sobs and the trembling breath he released as if he'd been holding it since the day they vanished. Rowan looked away for a moment, blinking rapidly. Blade lowered his head, pressing his muzzle into Mara's back, as if joining the circle. But the moment fractured when a broken groan came from behind a boulder. Varen's last loyal man tried to crawl toward his dropped rifle. Rowan's voice cut through the air. "Don't even think about it." The man froze, and the spell of reunion dissolved, replaced by urgency. Reed reluctantly loosened his hold on Mara and gently cupped her face. "We're not safe here." "Not yet." Mara nodded, wiping tears with the back of her hand. "I know," Varen said. "He still has others." "He does." Reed's jaw tightened, and they're spread across these mountains like wolves waiting for a flicker of movement. Rowan pointed her rifle toward the ridgeline. 3 more men were with him this morning. They'll be coming back soon. Mara felt the cold crawl up her spine. "They follow Blade?" "No," Reed shook his head. "We let Blade go." Her breath caught. "You sent him home?" Rowan stepped closer, guilty but firm. "We needed you to know we were alive. And we needed Varen to think we were still right where he left us." Reed rubbed Mara's shoulders. "Blade was the only creature those men never suspected. We trained him to return when the time came." "But you risked him," Mara whispered. Rowan knelt beside the old horse. "Manga, Blade, save us more times than I can count." He knew this was his last mission. Blade lifted his head proudly, as if to confirm every word. Mara wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his faded mane. "You brave, stubborn, loyal thing." Reed touched her arm gently. "We don't have long. We need to move." "Move where?" Mara asked. Rowan pointed toward a twisted cedar perched atop the canyon. "There's a hideout we built higher up. It's safe. We can talk there." Reed turned to the injured outlaw. "Tie him," and grabbed their weapons. Rowan obeyed, binding the man's hands and feet with rope taken from Varen's saddle. Mara watched her daughter work. Confident, capable, a woman forged by the wilderness. When Rowan finished, she met Mara's gaze. "I waited 15 years to see your face again." Mara reached out, brushing the side of her daughter's cheek. "I missed 15 years of it." Rowan swallowed and looked away quickly before the emotion could overtake her. Reed put a hand on Mara's back. "Cool me. There's more you need to know." They climbed a rough path along the canyon wall, Mara with Blade following close, Reed and Rowan taking point. The higher they climbed, the more the world opened beneath them. Long shadows stretching across the land, the sky beginning to bruise with sunset, the wind tugging at their clothes like a restless spirit. At the next ledge, Reed pulled Mara aside. "There's something we haven't told you," he said quietly. It was the same warning tone he'd used before, but now they had a moment to breathe. Mara steadied herself. "Tell me." Reed looked toward Rowan as if asking permission. Rowan nodded. "She deserves to know." Reed took a long breath. Varen didn't just want the land for silver. Mara frowned. He said it was about the treasure, the old Spanish coins. That's what he believed. Reed paused. "It's what we wanted him to believe." Mara blinked. "What are you saying?" Rowan stepped closer. "Mama, the thing buried under the barn wasn't silver. Not just silver." Reed finished her thought. It was a deed. A secret deed signed by the government. Something worth far more than any mine. Mara's heart stumbled. A deed to what? Reed's voice lowered to a whisper, heavy with a weight he'd carried alone for 15 years. A deed granting control of the entire valley. Water rights, grazing land, mineral rights, everything. Worth a fortune. Worth killing for. Mara felt the canyon sway beneath her. She had always assumed Varen was a greedy man chasing a myth. But he had been chasing something real. Something powerful. Something deadly. Rowan tightened her grip on her rifle. And Mama, that deed didn't belong to Daddy at all. Mara stared at them. "Then who?" Reed looked her directly in the eyes. "It belonged to you, Mara." Her pulse stopped. Her breath vanished. The world shrank to a pinpoint. "You're the rightful owner of the valley," Reed said. "You always were." And Varen knew it. Mara staggered a step. Blade nudged her gently to keep her steady. Rowan's voice softened. "He didn't kidnap us for silver, Mama. He kidnapped us because he couldn't get to you. And he still wants you dead," Reed said. Mara pressed a hand to her mouth. The truth settled over her like a storm cloud. She wasn't just a woman caught in a mystery. She was the reason it existed. Rowan scanned the horizon. "We need to move. More riders are coming." Reed took Mara's hand, firm, steady. "You're the key to everything, Mara. That's why we hid. That's why we stayed alive. To protect you." Mara's breath shook. 15 years ago, she lost her family. Now she'd found them again, just in time to learn she was the center of a war she never asked for. And the next battle was already riding toward them. They climbed higher toward the cedar hideout as the sun dipped behind the ridges, painting the canyon in a dark copper glow. The wind carried the scent of dust and pine, the same scent Mara remembered from the day Reed and Rowan vanished. Everything felt familiar, yet entirely changed, like stepping back into a memory that had been rewritten without her. Blade stayed close, his breath heavy but determined. The old horse had followed this trail countless times over the years, and now every careful step felt like another secret being revealed. At the top of the ridge, Rowan pulled aside a cluster of brush, revealing a narrow slit in the rock barely wide enough for one person at a time. "This way," she whispered. Mara ducked through, Reed steadying her with a hand on her back. Inside, the rock crevice opened into a small hollow, a hidden camp, built over years of necessity. A fire pit circled with stones, bundles of dried meat, blankets worn thin, a carved wooden cup sitting atop a flat rock table. A life carved out of hiding. Mara took a shaky breath. "You live here?" "For a while," Reed said. "We moved often, but this place was home longer than most." Rowan unslung her pack. "Daddy always said you'd come find us someday." He never stopped believing. Mara stared at her daughter, grown, hardened, yet with the same spark she'd had at 16. "I look for you every day," she whispered. "Every sunrise. I hope." Rowan stepped closer, and Mara drew her into a trembling embrace. Rowan stiffened at first and used to gentleness, then slowly softened, leaning into her mother as if remembering something she once knew. Reed kept watch at the entrance, his eyes scanning the canyon below. "They'll be here before long," he said quietly. "We need to talk fast." Mara released Rowan. "Tell me everything." Reed returned to her side, his voice low and measured. The voice of a man who had carried truth like a burning coal. "When Tobias." He caught himself, shaking his head. "When I found the Spanish silver under the barn, it wasn't just coins. It was wrapped with a sealed document." Rowan opened the wooden box they'd kept hidden in the hollow. Inside lay an oilskin bundle. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing the old, brittle parchment with an embossed crest still visible despite years of wear. Mara reached out but stopped just short of touching it. "That belonged to me?" "Yes," Reed said. "Your grandfather signed it to you on your 16th birthday. But he died before he could give it to you." Mara's chest tightened. Her grandfather had been a stubborn, quiet man, the kind who spoke little but watched everything. He'd built the ranch with his own hands. She'd always thought the land simply passed to her because she was the only surviving child. Rowan tapped the parchment. "This deed gives you control of half the valley. Not just grazing rights, water, trade routes, and mineral claims all the way to the foothills." Mara felt lightheaded. "Why didn't anyone ever tell me?" Reed set a hand on her shoulder. "Your father didn't know. Your grandfather hid it. Maybe he sensed trouble coming. Trouble in the shape of Marcus Varen," Rowan added with a scowl. Mara swallowed. "He knew the deed existed." Reed nodded grimly. "Not at first. But when I dug up those coins, someone must have seen." And Varen started asking questions. Mara thought back. The banker visiting the ranch, smiling too wide, asking her to sell, offering more money each time. It had felt strange then. Now it made her skin crawl. Rowan crouched beside Blade, unbuckling his worn saddlebag. "He attacked us at the creek that night. Thought Daddy could lead him to the rest of the treasure. Reed's face darkened. When he realized you were the real piece he needed, the one who held the legal claim, he tried to force the information out of me. Mara's breath hitched. So you ran. We ran, Rowan corrected. And we never stopped. Mara wiped a tear from her cheek. All these years, you could have come home. Reed shook his head. Not while Varen was alive. Not while he was watching the house. Waiting for a moment you were alone. Mara remembered the day she heard footsteps inside her home. The chilling smile of the stranger at her window. The way Blade refused to let her walk toward the house. He was already there, she whispered. Yes, Reed said. He expected Blade to lead you back to us. But he didn't count on us being ready. Rowan stepped to Mara's side. We were waiting for the right moment. The moment when he slipped, when he made a mistake. And sending Blade home, Mara whispered, was the moment you chose. Reed squeezed her hand. We trusted he'd find you. And he did, before Mara could answer. Blade's ears shot up. Reed stiffened. Rowan reached for her rifle. Hoofbeats. Distant but getting closer. Rowan whispered, they're coming up the east side. Reed grabbed his weapon and moved to the entrance to peer down the ridge. 6 riders. No 7. Mara's heart thudded like a war drum. We can fight them. Reed shook his head. Not head on. Rowan's voice was steady. We can outsmart them. We've been doing it for years. Reed turned to Mara urgently. You need to hear the rest. There's something bigger at play. Another crack of hoofbeats. Shouts below. They found the trail, Rowan hissed. Reed. Mara pressed. What else is there? Reed took a breath, the kind taken right before choosing truth over safety. Varen wanted the deed, he said. But someone else wanted it too. Someone else? Mara echoed. Someone worse. Rowan added, her eyes sharp. Varen wasn't working alone. Reed nodded grimly. There's a man behind him. A man with money, influence, and the law wrapped around his fist. Mara's pulse quickened. Who? Reed looked down the ridge as the riders came into view, armed, determined, ruthless. And then he turned to Mara. It was never just about Varen. Rowan lifted her rifle. Mama, the man pulling the strings, Reed raised his weapon beside her, is the new county marshal. Mara's breath froze. The law itself had been hunting her family. Below them, the riders began to climb. The canyon held its breath. The world went silent except for wind and danger closing in. Reed touched Mara's cheek once, soft, steady. We're not running anymore, he said. This time we fight. The canyon tightened around them as the riders climbed. Hoofbeats echoed off the stone walls like distant thunder rolling closer, closer, until the vibrations reached Mara's boots. Reed and Rowan moved with the silent precision of people who had lived too long in danger. Rowan knelt at the mouth of the crevice, rifle steadied on a rock. Reed scanned the ridge with calm calculation, marking where each rider would appear. Mara pressed her back to the canyon wall, breathing shallowly. She was not used to this life, the life her husband and daughter had lived for 15 years. A life of hiding, fighting, surviving. Rowan's whisper broke the silence. They split up, for coming up the main trail. 3 circling south. Reed nodded, just like before. His voice held a quiet sadness that made Mara ache. He shouldn't have been forced to say like before. Their family story shouldn't have had a before like this. Rowan's eyes locked onto the first shadowed figure appearing on a ledge below. Marshal Harrow's men? No doubt, Reed muttered. He's been hunting this deed longer than he's been wearing that badge. Mara tightened her grip on the rock beside her. Why? What does he want with our land? Reed turned to her, voice low. Because whoever controls the upper valley controls the water. The words hit like a blow. Water in the west was worth more than gold, more than silver, more than life itself. Mara's land wasn't just valuable, it was power. And Harrow wanted that power enough to kill for it. Rowan fired the first shot, a clean, controlled crack that echoed down the canyon. A figure stumbled behind a boulder, curses rising on the wind. Move, Reed said. They'll try to flank. Rowan shifted positions with practiced ease. Reed covered the south ridge. Mara stayed low, heart hammering like a colt's hooves. The hidden camp around them, the blankets, the carved cup, the years of survival, felt suddenly fragile beneath the rising storm. Blade gave a warning snort, muscles tense. "Easy, boy," Mara whispered, stroking his neck. Down the ridge, one of the riders called out. "Reed Carson, Marshal Harrow sends his regards." Rowan's jaw clenched. He always did love theatrics. Another shout followed. "And the woman with you, the one who owns the deed, she comes with us." Mara froze. Reed didn't. He raised his rifle and fired. The bullet struck the rock at the rider's feet, scattering chips of stone. "You're not touching my wife," Reed called back, voice steady as iron. A moment of stunned silence. Then the canyon exploded with gunfire. Bullets ricocheted off the rocks. Dust sprayed into the air. Blades of sunlight glinted off polished gun barrels. Rowan shifted, firing again and again, forcing the men back behind cover. Reed took out a shooter, inching too close to the southern ridge. Mara could only cover her ears as stray rounds sparked against the canyon walls. She never felt so painfully aware of being unarmed, unprepared, exposed. Rowan ducked behind a rock. "Mama, down!" Reed grabbed Mara, pulling her deeper into the crevice, just as a bullet ripped through the space where her head had been a heartbeat before. "I can't do this," Mara gasped, shaking. "I can't fight like you two." Reed held her face between his hands, firm, gentle. "You don't have to. You just have to stay alive." Rowan slid beside them, cheeks flushed from adrenaline. "They're trying to drive us toward the lower trail. If they push us far enough, they'll corner us," Reed finished. Mara stared at them, panic rising. "You can't win this fight. There are too many." Reed pressed his forehead to hers. "That's why we're not going to fight them." He looked at Rowan. "Show your mother." Rowan nodded and sprinted toward the back of the hollow. She pushed aside a pile of branches, revealing a narrow tunnel, barely wider than a person's shoulders, descending deep into the rock. Mara stared. "What is that?" "A way out," Rowan said. "Daddy dug out years ago, just in case." Reed touched Mara's arm. "It leads to the Cedar Ravine. From there, we can cut toward the old homestead. Harrow won't expect us to go that way. Too dangerous, too steep." Rowan gave a tight smile. "Which means it's perfect for us." Gunfire cracked again outside. Dust drifted down from the crevice ceiling. Reed grabbed the packs, slinging them over his shoulders. "Go. Rowan, you first." Rowan dropped into the tunnel, sliding out of sight. Reed turned to Mara. She saw fear in his eyes, but also determination, love, and something else. Regret. Deep, aching regret. "When we get out," he whispered, "there's something I need to tell you." Mara searched his face. "Tell me now." No, his voice broke a little. "If something happens, I need you alive to hear it." Before she could protest, he lifted her gently, guiding her into the tunnel. "Reed," she said, voice trembling. "Don't leave me." He kissed her, soft, urgent, desperate. The kind of kiss that said what words couldn't. "I'm right behind you," he whispered. Mara crawled forward, clutching the journal, feeling the tunnel walls close around her. She reached Rowan's hand, waiting below, and slid into the deeper darkness. Behind her, Reed turned back toward the mouth of the hollow. Gunfire thundered. He raised his rifle. "Then, Reed, move!" Rowan shouted from below. But the canyon roared with another shot, closer, sharper, aimed straight at where Reed stood. And Mara screamed his name as the world shook around them. The tunnel trembled with the force of the gunshot. Dust drifted over Mara's hands as she clawed her way down the narrow passage, heart pounding in her throat. "Daddy!" Rowan shouted somewhere below. "Get down!" Another shot cracked. Mara twisted around in the tight darkness, desperate to climb back toward the entrance, back toward Reed, but Rowan grabbed her wrist from below. "Wait! Mama, don't! You'll block him. He's out there alone." Mara cried, voice breaking. Rowan's grip tightened. "He's doing what he's always done, keeping us alive." Mara froze. Tears blurred the dim shaft of light stretching down the tunnel, and another shot echoed above them, then silence. A silence so heavy it felt like a weight pressing the air from her lungs. "Reed," Mara whispered toward the small circle of daylight. No answer. Rowan swallowed hard, looking up at the entrance. "He's drawing them away, giving us time." Mara covered her mouth, praying silently, grasping the journal tight against her chest. Then, faintly, Reed's voice drifted down the tunnel. Go, go, not a cry of pain, a command. Rowan didn't hesitate. She tugged her mother downward. Come on, he'll follow us. Mara let herself be pulled, though her heart stayed behind with the man standing alone between bullets and his family. The tunnel dropped into the earth like a throat, cool and narrow. Mara scraped her elbows and knees, but kept moving, breath echoing in the closeness. Then, suddenly, open air. Rowan slid out first into a shadowed ravine lined with tall, twisted cedars. Mara tumbled after her, landing on soft forest moss. The air here smelled of damp earth, pine sap, and the faint sweet scent of wild mint. The narrow world of the canyon vanished behind them. Blade clattered out after them, squeezing his massive form through the rock with a grunt. Rowan threw her arms around the horse's neck. He made it, she whispered. But Reed hadn't emerged. Not yet. Rowan scanned the ridge above the ravine. He'll come out the long way. There's another exit, one he dug himself. Mara's eyes glistened. You seem very sure. He promised, Rowan said softly, and Daddy doesn't break his promises. Mara wished she could believe it as easily. Rowan adjusted the rifle on her shoulder. We need to move. If Harrow finds the lower trail, a distant shout cut her off. Harrow's men were spreading. Fast. Rowan grabbed Mara's hand. This way. They ran through the ravine, weaving between cedar trunks. Branches whipped past Mara's face as she tried to keep up with her daughter's sure-footed strides. Rowan had grown up in these mountains. The forest bent and breathed around her like an old friend. But Mara kept glancing back, waiting for a figure to appear behind them. Reed, watch your step, Rowan whispered. They emerged at the edge of a long slope. Beneath them lay a hidden hollow, and in the center, a rough-roof shelter made of stone and old timber. Your father built this, Rowan said, when we needed to disappear for a few days. It's safe. Safe. The word nearly brought Mara to her knees. She hurried toward the shelter, but before she took 10 steps, a single gunshot rang through the hollow. Rowan grabbed Mara and dragged her down behind a boulder. Not Daddy's gun, Rowan whispered. Mara's breath caught as voices drifted through the cedars. Harrow's men, spreading out, hunting. Rowan steadied her rifle, eyes narrowed. Mama, if they followed us, he'll be coming up behind them. Mara looked at her daughter. The girl she lost at 16, now a woman hardened by wilderness and danger. Rowan's hands didn't shake. Her breath was steady. She was ready to defend them both. But Mara wasn't. Not without Reed beside them. A twig snapped. Rowan raised her rifle. Mara held her breath. A shadow emerged through the branches. A man. Tall. Broad. But not Harrow. Reed. Blood trickled down his forehead. His shirt torn, but he was standing. Mama, Rowan whispered, lowering her gun. He made it. Mara ran to him, heart bursting in relief. Reed caught her mid-stride, pulling her into his arms with a strength that filled the world to its edges. You're hurt, Mara breathed, touching the blood at his hairline. Bullet grazed me, he said softly, but I'm here. He pressed his forehead to hers. I told you, I'd follow. Rowan approached, relief softening her face. Daddy, Reed cupped her cheek with trembling fingers. You did good, Ro, just like I taught you. Mara looked between them, tears slipping down her cheeks. We stay together now. No. More running. Reed's eyes darkened. We stay together after this ends. After what ends? Mara whispered. He hesitated. Rowan's jaw tightened. Tell her. Reed took Mara's hands. Harrow won't stop. Not after today. Not after 15 years. He'll keep hunting whoever holds the deed, including you. Then we give him nothing, Mara said. Burn it. It wouldn't matter, Reed said. He doesn't need the papers. He needs leverage. And we're it. Rowan glanced toward the ridge. He's coming. We all know it. Mara felt fear coil inside her, but something else too. Resolve. Reed looked from Rowan to Mara. We end this. Tonight. Together. Mara lifted her chin. Then tell us the plan. He did. quietly, efficiently, every step laid out with the precision of a man who had spent half his life outsmarting hunters. Rowan listened with fierce focus. Mara listened with love. And when Reed finished, Rowan nodded and said the words that sealed their fate. Let's finish what he started. They positioned themselves along the ravine. Rowan took the high ledge. Reed crouched behind a fallen log. Mara stood near the mouth of the hollow, blade beside her like a living shield. The journal lay at Mara's feet, bait. Footsteps approached. Slow, deliberate. Marshal Harrow emerged through the trees, gun drawn, eyes gleaming with triumph. Well, he said softly, look who crawled out from the dirt. Mara didn't back away. Reed didn't flinch. Rowan didn't miss. 3 shots cracked through the ravine. Only 2 found their mark. Harrow fell to his knees. Shock etched across his face as Reed stepped forward. This ends now, Reed said. And with one final shot, the man who destroyed their lives dropped to the ground, the forest swallowing the last echo of gunfire. Silence settled. Mara exhaled the breath she'd been holding for 15 years. Rowan slung her rifle over her shoulder. Reed reached out and closed his hand around hers. They stood like that a while, letting the peace seep in. For the first time in 15 years, they were free. Truly free. They walked out of the mountains together with Blade beside them. A family reborn. A family restored. A family built on survival, love, and the kind of unbreakable bonds only time and hardship can forge. The world felt wide again. The future bright. And a long ride home sweeter than anything they could remember. If you felt this tale in your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wild West Emotional Tales, where every story rides through the dust, the danger, and the kind of love that never dies. See you in the next tale, partner.